great turnout for us.
Gonna make us fly that day or whatever?
Oh no, he's going Monday. Are you going all day or just up Sunday? Oh, I have to go Friday to Sunday.
No.
So good.
That's nice. I'll take it. You never need.
You like it or not?
Press, that's one thing, that would be good, but punching is different. There you go. It's a line press. 70s, definitely.
Huh?
Definitely 70s.
Originally a Syrian.
Well, yeah. Have you, sir? I'm doing good, sir. How are you?
Turn it on now, Dad.
We're gathering for this, so much. Any guess on whether or not you'll actually be after?
One more. Oh, you got two fingers?
I may or may not want it.
I snapped my fingers over one on one.
They know this is why I love it.
The dead one's at the chair.
Yes. The batteries in the wrong one.
Yeah.
Brian wants to go right around the side signs.
Yeah, right. What? 110?
It's optimistic.
No. We should start. We should go back to the, you know, who's gonna buy the drink that's closed? They're gonna give you 2 ounces of gas. That got us through a few years of Trump. Yes. Oh, for sure.
No.
Or 110.
Yes.
When you replace those, can you grab me a camera battery? I don't want to walk away from this thing.
Okay.
But not, you know, I'm just, I'm flying without a
Do you want
wire.
yours or you just want any?
Whatever's closest.
Okay.
And it might be easier just to grab one of the file box ones.
I'm gonna go with the camera.
For the rose water, that's.
It's a lovely room. Actually, there's South on. Or you see Channel 2 movies?
I do. Yep.
So the final gathering is 2:45.
Yep, perfect, yep.
They said she's coming soon.
Oh, there you go.
Pretty sure.
Soon in a relative term.
Like we're not going to get a delay.
Well, sometimes we don't get a delay and there's still a delay.
Yeah, no, clearly it's happening.
Good to see. But if the final gather is at 2:45, we could continue.
We switch this back to.
Like, you know where to find it.
Where did it be on time?
Can you just tell me about like what those are? So, right on here. Behold or something.
Black circle. Goes forward. And then backwards.
Is this for Hobbit?
Yeah.
At least it was there in 1992.
Nice.
Oh, you know.
Exactly.
I'm sure nothing has changed since
You must be just taller.
I haven't grown since 1992.
I have, but horizontally.
So, tip my back.
We have a 2-minute warning on the briefing. 2-minute warning on the briefing. Thank you.
Someone's up?
I'm waiting. I'm not going to start speaking. Don't worry.
Yes, it is.
I'm actually first generation born.
I thought you were about to start singing. You're stuck for Thursday.
That's always a
Yeah, I
I haven't read it this weekend. But so far it still seems like
Hi, everyone. Okay. Today we have another great guest joining us in the briefing room, Secretary Cardona. As a mother of 2 little children myself, including one going to elementary school, I know you all have lots of questions about schools and school reopening and COVID, so he is here to provide an update, take a few questions, and it's great to be here with you. Fellow Nutmegger, just a little Connecticut plug. Okay.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jen. I'm, across the country, there's an excitement for the first day of school, and those of you that have children, you know what I'm talking about. There's a vibe about going back to school, and this year, there's no exception. We're committed to doing everything we can to ensure we get kids back into the classroom safely. We know students are provided the best opportunity to learn and thrive when they're learning in person, in their classroom, with their peers, with their teachers. We made significant progress last spring, bringing the students back in person. About 90% of the educators across the country are vaccinated. 180 million Americans have been vaccinated, including millions of students. We provided $130 billion in American Rescue Plan funds to support safe school reopening. It's being used now to provide summer learning opportunities for students and help our buildings be prepared for the return of students in the fall. And this week, I'm very proud to announce the Department of Education launched the Return to School Roadmap. It provides parents, educators, students, and communities the resources they need to feel confident and be ready for a safe upcoming school year. To make sure we safely open all schools for in-person learning this fall, which is the expectation. It has been and it continues to be. The roadmap includes 3 priorities that are critical to a safe reopening. The first one is protecting the health and safety of our students, our educators, and our staff. We need to make sure that we're leading with health and safety first. The second priority is supporting the social, emotional, and mental health needs of our students and our staff. We know that in order for students to learn at their potential, they need a strong social and emotional foundation, and we're prepared to provide that. The third, accelerating academic achievement. We must do everything in our power to help students not only catch up, but to excel during this upcoming school year. As a part of the roadmap, we'll be releasing resources, tools, and holding events to help more schools and more communities and parents and students prepare for the fall and make sure that every student is set up for success. We're also highlighting how the American Rescue Plan funds can be used to support these areas. These include helping get our young people vaccinated. We're doubling down to get more students vaccinated as they return to school. We know vaccines are working, and they're the safest and most effective way to fight back the COVID-19, to prevent outbreaks, and to ensure a safe school year. That's why I'm echoing the President's call to action to host pop-up vaccine clinics in every school across the country, to enlist trusted leaders in our community, to build vaccine confidence. It's all hands on deck here. And to get creative with incentives. And I know I've heard from states where they're doing great work incentivizing it and getting student voice in the conversation to make sure that students hear from other students as well. I'm also excited that next week the administration is holding Back to School Week of Action to mobilize school districts, students, teachers, organizations, and leaders to get more young people vaccinated. Working with parent leaders and influencers to have conversations with students and families about the importance of getting vaccinated and why it's our strongest tool to combat the virus and get students back into the classrooms, on sports fields, in school plays, and among their peers this fall. Next week, I'll be traveling with the second gentleman to Kansas to promote vaccination efforts in that area. I'm additionally excited to lift up some additional efforts we're engaged in with partners across the country, including incorporating COVID vaccination into sports physicals for student athletes this summer and fall. The National PTA, we're working with them and the American Academy of Pediatrics to send pediatricians to back-to-school nights and PTA meetings so parents could hear from doctors directly. As I said before, it's all hands on deck. We all want our students in classrooms where they learn best. The resources are there and the urgency is there. Now is the time to get our students back into the classroom, not to be complacent or let politics get in front of what is best for our students across the country. I'm excited about the efforts we have underway at the department and across the administration to support a safe return to school this fall and make this school year the best one yet for all of our students. But we know it's not enough to get back to school safely. We owe it to our students to build back better. We owe it to our students not to go back to what school was like in March 2020. That's why we must pass the Build Back Better agenda. We have the opportunity right now to transform students' educational experiences. We can build truly equitable schools that finally close gaps that have long existed in our education system across the country. We can set up all of our children for success by investing in our strongest asset, our people, and ensure America wins the future. It'll give every family access to free pre-kindergarten for 3- and 4-year-olds. It'll give students access to 2 years of community college. It'll increase Pell Grants, rebuild and modernize our crumbling schools by investing in our school infrastructure. These resources will allow us to build an education system more equitable and excellent than any system we've ever had in the past. These resources will allow us to build back better and give our students opportunities to have success not only now, but for generations to come. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer a few questions.
Nancy.
Thank you so much, Secretary Cardona, for coming. Are you engaged in discussions with teachers' unions that might be reluctant about returning to the classroom this fall because of the Delta variant? And how significant do you expect that challenge to be?
You know, I really don't expect it to be a challenge to work with our teachers to get our schools reopened. In fact, I think they've shown a lot of proactive communication about wanting to reopen schools. All teachers want schools reopened. We just want to make sure that they're safe for students and for staff. So I look at it as another partner in the process of making sure that we're doing what's right to reopen our schools. And while the Delta variant is providing new challenges, we have the tools, we have the resources, and we have the experience of what worked last year to get it done safely.
Well, what about states that are, say, prohibiting school districts from imposing mask mandates? Are you worried that there will be teachers' unions that say, if we can't keep the schools safe the way that we feel we should, we don't want to come back?
I'm worried that decisions that are being made that are not putting students at the center and student health and safety at the center is going to be why schools may be disrupted. So we know what to do. You know, don't be the reason why schools are disrupted because of the politicization of this effort to reopen schools. We know what works. We have to keep our students safe. We have to keep our educators safe.
Tam?
Yeah, reopening school is one thing. I think you just alluded to this. Keeping school open would seem to be another thing entirely.
Right.
What are you most worried about in terms of the ability to keep classrooms open, to keep kids, you know, running up that hill to the school every day?
We know what works. This is not our first time doing this. We have the benefit of the experience of last year. We have strong CDC guidance. The Department of Education has several handbooks. The back-to-school roadmap with tools, checklists. The tools are there. It's just, are we following the mitigation strategies? You know what I'm worried about? The adult actions getting in the way of schools safely reopening. Let our educators educate, let our leaders, school leaders lead, and we can get our schools reopened safely. And another thing that I'm worried about that I want to share is complacency. Let's not go back to the school system of March 2020. Our students deserve more. The funds are there. The urgency is there. This is our time to build back better.
Can I just draw out, what do you mean by adult actions?
Well, when we make policies that go against what CDC recommendations are, you know, at the end of the day, we want to make sure the students are safe. We want to make sure the staff is safe. We know how to do that. So let's not get in the way of school systems doing policies that they know work for students and staff.
Will there be repercussions?
Francesca, go ahead. Thank you. I'm over here.
Hi.
Thank you. We know that vaccination rates among younger Americans 18 to 24 are lower. We also know that vaccination rates among African Americans are also lower as a percentage of population. So what kind of guidance is the Department of Education giving historically black colleges and universities this fall to help keep their students safe?
Thank you for that question. I visited Howard University about a month ago, and I was so impressed with how they stood up vaccination clinics in their facilities. And we had students from Howard University administering the vaccine. They're using their name in the community to build confidence in the community, the black community, so that they felt comfortable coming in. We're also setting up pop-up clinics in schools. You know, the president put a charge there. Let's get pop-up vaccination clinics in gymnasiums. I visited a gymnasium at a high school in Washington, D.C., where, you know, parents felt comfortable with that school. They know the principal, they know the teachers. They feel they're more likely to go get vaccinated in a school that they know the folks. And another thing that we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of our youth. You know, student voice is critically important. Let's get our youth, our high school students talking about it. Because when students talk to one another about how they're safe when they got the vaccine, it's more likely to lead to an increase. I'm excited about that.
What about testing?
Well, the American Rescue Plan provides $10 billion in testing, so the tools are there. Access to testing is much better. We were reopening schools last year. I remember reopening schools last year without testing availability, without vaccines, and we were able to do it safely because we followed the mitigation strategies. A year later, we have resources, we have testing, and we have vaccinations. We need to get it done.
Go all the way in the back, Yahoo. Yeah, go ahead.
Secretary, but what are you going to do if and when teachers' unions protest and, you know, with placards that say we can't teach from the grave, online until cases decline? As the federal secretary with limited powers to affect local decisions, what are you going to do? And, you know, as a parent, as a journalist, I know about the $130 billion. I know that online has a lot of risks for kids. Everybody knows that, but what are we going to do in those situations?
I think, what are we doing? We have the roadmap, which very clear guidance. We're promoting pop-up clinics. We're sharing best practices of where it's happening. We're monitoring data. We stood up a system in the Department of Education. I'm having calls with governors daily. I'm having calls with superintendents, school chiefs, to problem solve with them to make sure that we can get them in there. And you know, the way the question was framed, I'd like to look at it this way: how are we working with our teachers' unions to ensure a safe reopening of schools? They're doing a lot of work and they're investing their own money to make sure that our schools can safely reopen and getting the message out to their teachers. We're working hand in hand to make sure that our students have teachers in front of the classroom, but that they both feel safe.
Kelly?
Mr. Secretary, one of the big differences this time is that children are becoming infected more easily because Delta is more transmissible.
Right.
So we might have, unlike March 2020, where there would be children in the classroom who themselves become ill. Are you formulating policy for how schools should deal with the impact on other students, if there's quarantining requirements, if it's classrooms with only vaccinated children, mixed vaccination status? How are you going to deal with those dimensions?
Thank you. We're working very closely with CDC to have a unified message, and we lean very heavily on our health experts to make sure that we're communicating which mitigation strategies should be employed based on what we're seeing with the strains of COVID. But I'll tell you what worked. When you wear masks, when you provide distancing, when you are testing regularly, and when you're quarantining, you can function in a school. So we're expecting our education leaders and our educators to follow those practices that worked last year, and we expect our students to be in classroom every day.
Secretary Cardona, when kids have masks on in the classroom, how serious does that impact?
Stephanie's asking a question. Go ahead.
Kids at this point have gotten used to wearing masks, my children included.
Right.
What is your message to governors like Governor DeSantis in Florida and Governor Abbott of Texas who have banned mask mandates?
You know, don't be the reason why schools are interrupted. Our kids have suffered enough. Let's do what we know works. Let's do what we know works across the country. We shouldn't get politics doesn't have a role in this. Educators know what to do. We did it last year. So I have calls out to those states, but at the end of the day, I want to work with Texas. I want to work with Florida. I want to make sure those students have access to in-person learning. So at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and it's critically important that we have conversations with governors directly, with state chiefs directly. We want to be an ally and make sure that we're supporting our students. At the end of the day, we're talking about students being in classrooms. They've suffered enough. It's time for them to be in the classroom without disruption to their learning.
Secretary Cardona, when kids have masks on in the classroom, how seriously does that hurt their learning?
Secretary Cardona.
Less than if they're at home. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The student loan payment freeze ends next month. Democratic lawmakers and advocates have said that the lack of guidance so far from the administration has left a lot of borrowers confused and lenders reluctant to put out guidance, maybe alarming them that their student loan repayments will start. So do you guys have any additional guidance for that? And if not, when can we expect?
Sure. I'm not announcing anything today, but I will tell you this has been the highest priority for us: getting schools safely reopened and taking care of our borrowers. And when we have information to share, we want to make sure that they have enough of an on-ramp to prepare, and they have communication early so they can prepare for that. It is a priority for us, and we're having conversations daily, and we hope to have information soon.
Steve?
Just as a follow-up to that, there was a study earlier this summer that said 60% of borrowers are not yet ready to make their payments. They have less than 2 months. When are they going to hear from you?
Very soon. I don't have anything today, but as I said, this is a priority for us. The borrowers are in need of information, and they're also in need of relief.
Bill?
Mr. Secretary, I understand what the federal position is, but given how fluid things have been over the course of the last couple of weeks with the insurgence of Delta, is there anything metrics-wise or numbers-wise, threshold-wise, that you would look at and say, all right, maybe in-person is not the best answer right now, even if the year gets started, or is it in-person no matter what, we have the mitigation tools?
You know, we know what works. And yes, we're looking at the metrics, and obviously in close consultation with CDC and local health directors, because there are many local factors that contribute to whether or not a school should be open. We're going to continue to monitor it. We're going to continue to work with states. But I'm also looking at the policies that adults are putting in place that are putting students at risk. And I think while we have a reopening team that's focusing on the metrics, COVID spread, school reopening, we're also monitoring the decisions that adults are making where politics are getting in the way and it's putting students at risk. So our efforts are going to go there as well.
Honor?
you made the point just again that
Sure.
Politicians don't be the reason why schools close. On the flip side, if you're a parent in one of these states, should families feel safe sending their children to schools where there aren't mask mandates?
You know, as a parent myself, I would make sure that when my wife and I are making decisions about sending our children to school, I want to make sure that they're going into a safe learning environment. I know that I can send my children into school with masks, although both of my children were vaccinated. If that's the rule in the school, that's what we'll follow. I do ask parents to communicate with schools now and make sure that they're comfortable sending their children to school. And I'm also going to be monitoring where places have rules that are limiting mask use, whether or not students that need to be in school are not going because of a lack of confidence. To me, those are adult actions preventing students to their right of public education.
And is there any, if you find that that's an issue, is there anything that from the federal level you can do, any leverage that you guys
If
have?
we find that because of poor policy, students are not accessing the right to public education, we will have conversations with those states and take that very seriously.
Yamiche and Jeff, and then we got to wrap it up and see if it's got to go.
Thank you, Secretary. I'm over here.
Sure. Hi.
Thanks for taking my question. Thanks, John, for letting me ask it. My question is, you've talked a bunch about kind of science not being in the way, politics not being
Right.
get in the way of science. I wonder what mechanisms, what sticks, what sort of consequences might the education department have in its toolbox to ensure that in districts where we see school leaders fighting with, frankly, politicians when it comes to CDC guidance, that the education department might be able to back some of those school districts up. We're seeing places where school
Right.
districts want to mandate masks, but obviously state leaders are saying they can't do that. What could the education department do to ensure that those leaders have?
Sure. We're going to constantly work with those states, with those leaders. At the end of the day, we're on the same team for the kids, right? And, you know, I applaud Governor Hutchinson for what he's doing. And I recognize that we have to be malleable to address the increase in spread. And that requires partnership. You know, withholding money, that's going to hurt kids. That's going to hurt kids more. So we're going to continue to work with those states and do what we can to help them understand how important it is to make sure students are getting into school. And my hope is that students go into schools in those communities as well. But if we're starting to notice that students are not going in because they don't feel confident, then we're going to have conversations about that.
The conversation that you said you don't want to withhold money, is there anything else that the department can do if it's not, that won't hurt kids, but that can send a message that science and politics can't mix?
We're in this to stay. We want to make sure those kids get into school, and we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, can you give us an update on the proposal to teach more black history in schools? Did the Republican black backlash over that have an impact over your plans?
You know, I always say I trust my educators across the country to make sure that our curriculum promotes the beautiful diversity of this country. And we could do so as educators in a way to unify our students in our country and show respect to others. That's another example of something that's become politicized. And I have confidence in my educators, and I have confidence in their ability to teach students about our history. And in the process, we can learn about one another and become a stronger nation. Thank you.
Still on track, that proposal?
Which would, you talking about the priorities?
Yes.
Yeah, the priorities are still what they are. I think for us, the way we put it forward allows districts and states to put in their proposals and how they want to teach it. But I think, again, it became a politicized issue that didn't need to, and it took us away from what I think is most important, our Build Back Better agenda and getting students safely back into school. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary.
All right, thanks.
Always welcome to join us.
Thank you. All right, I'll get my mask on here.
Would you like to teach more science in school, Mr. Secretary?
Want to get in school safely? We could talk about the discussions there, and I'll be back for that. Thank you.
We're pro-science, just in case there was confusion. Okay. Couple of items for all of you at the top. Today, the President will announce a new set of actions aimed at advancing the goal of increasing the impact of his Build Back Better investments to address our climate crisis, positioning America to drive the electric vehicle future forward, outcompete China. He will sign an executive order, I know this was out there reported this morning, that sets an ambitious new target to make half of all new vehicles sold in 2030 zero-emissions vehicles, including battery electric, plug-in hybrid electric, or fuel cell electric vehicles. In addition, later today, the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Transportation will announce how they are addressing the previous administration's harmful rollbacks of near-term fuel efficiency and emissions standard. A good question a lot of you have been asking is, what is the implementation about this? They will announce the rulemaking, next steps in rulemaking process later today as well. These new actions, paired with the investments in the President's Build Back Better agenda, will strengthen American leadership in clean cars and trucks by accelerating innovation and manufacturing in the auto sector, bolstering the auto sector domestic supply chain, and growing auto jobs and good pay and benefits. We are also announcing today the Biden administration commitment we are committing more than $3.46 billion in new funding to help states and partners increase resilience and reduce the impacts of climate change nationwide. At a time when communities across the country are facing the impacts of the climate change crisis and grappling with extreme heat, wildfires, prolonged droughts, the onset of peak hurricane season, this historic addition of the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program will help states, localities, tribal and territorial governments finance projects to safeguard our communities for the future. FEMA Administrator Criswell is currently briefing the National Governors Association, Homeland Security Advisors Council on these investments, and we will have a fact sheet after the briefing detailing how much funding each state and locality will be receiving. Also wanted to note that today, senior White House officials, including Ambassador Susan Rice, Dana Remus, and Julie Rodriguez, will host a virtual convening with 8 state attorneys general as part of the President's ongoing strategy to combat the surge in gun crime we've seen over the last 18 months. During the meeting, the group will discuss policies and strategies to hold gun manufacturers and dealers accountable for wrongful conduct that contributes to guns making their way into the hands of criminals and be used in shootings around the country. We are committed to using every tool at our disposal to crack down on gun crime. That includes money to put more cops on the beat and support community anti-violence programs. It also means aggressive steps to stem the flow of guns used in crimes. And in addition to today's convening, we also announced today tough new regulations on untraceable ghost guns, as well as, and we also launched 5 regional gun trafficking strike forces, as you all know, and announced a national zero tolerance policy for gun dealers. Last item for all of you, as you all know, the President has been committed to the federal judiciary for decades, having served as the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's made it a chief priority to nominate deeply qualified nominees who are devoted to the rule of law and who represent the diversity of the country. He's done that at a historic pace. And his nominees are also being confirmed with unprecedented speed. Today he nominated 3 additional candidates for the federal judiciary, among them Justice Beth Robinson, Vermont's first openly LGBTQ Supreme Court justice, who would also be the first openly LGBTQ woman to serve on any federal circuit court. Under the President's leadership, we've also confirmed the most African American women as federal circuit judges of any single presidential term in American history, and the first Muslim Article III judge in American history. He's also chosen nominees from a wide variety of backgrounds, prosecutors, and also public defenders, law firm lawyers, and civil rights attorneys. That will continue to drive his decisions moving forward. Amr, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you. 2 questions. So, first I wanted to ask about thing related to yesterday, which the importance of continuing to work with New York as the situation with Governor Cuomo is playing out. With that said, it's a critical time for the state and the country with the surge of the Delta variant. Will the President pick up the phone and personally insist to the governor that for the good of the state, it's time to step down?
The President's addressed this, and I have no planned calls to preview or predict for you.
Okay. I also have a question EV related. Infrastructure bill, if I understand right, includes about half of what the President wanted in order to build a national network of charging stations. So how do you take EVs from the niche, or emerging from the niche to the mainstream without that necessary investment in charging stations?
Well, first I would say it's a historic investment in EV charging stations, and we also know that also as part of the investment is efforts to reduce the cost of purchasing electric vehicles. So I would say the President's commitment to making electric vehicles the vehicle of the future, further incentivizing the direction of the industry, which is already where it's headed, making us more competitive as it relates to China, is reflected both in the bill and the bill that's working its way through the Senate. Also in announcements like the one that was made today about that show clear initiative and commitment from this administration to make electric vehicles central to our focus moving forward.
I apologize. On the Governor Cuomo, you don't have calls to read out, but has there been a call?
No. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. 2 questions for you. Has the President received a formal recommendation yet from the Secretary of Defense to mandate vaccines for the military? And if so, does the President intend to accept that recommendation and sign a waiver authorizing that mandate?
Sure. Well, the President announced last week that he was asking the Secretary of Defense and the Defense Department to look into how and when they will add COVID to the list of mandatory vaccinations for our armed forces. We expect a determination soon. I'm not going to get ahead of that, and certainly he's going to rely on the recommendation of his Secretary of Defense.
Thank you. Also, on the COVID front, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is now fundraising off of President Biden's comments for him to, quote, get out of the way of people trying to help battle the COVID surge in that state. DeSantis has said, I'm standing in your way, I'm not going anywhere, and referred to the president as a power-hungry tyrant. What is your response to the governor and the administration's response to the governor? And is the president considering reaching out to DeSantis to talk this over?
Well, first, from day one, we've approached this not as a political issue, but a public health issue. We remain in touch with officials in Florida, just like we're in touch with officials from around the country about how we can provide assistance from the federal level to help address this public health crisis. What I have cited and what the president has cited is publicly available data about public health and the impact in Florida. It is factual, and it is a fact, and data that you all are aware of, that 25% of hospitalizations in the country are in Florida. It is also a fact that the governor has taken steps that are counter to public health recommendations. So we're here to state the facts. Frankly, our view is that this is too serious, deadly serious, to be doing partisan name-calling. That's what we're not doing here. We're focused on providing public health data, information to the people of Florida to make sure they understand what steps they should be taking, even if those are not steps taken at the top of the leadership in that state. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Republicans have made pretty clear over the last couple of days that they're drawing a red line on the debt ceiling in terms of their willingness to negotiate or to consider a clean debt ceiling increase. Does the president want Democrats to move that through reconciliation, or is she ready to have that fight at some point in September or October with Republicans, trying to get Republican support?
The president believes that Democrats and Republicans should move forward, as they did 3 times during the last administration, to raise the debt ceiling, something that they did even in the wake of the former president putting in place a $2 trillion tax cut that certainly did not do anything to reduce the deficit. So that's his view. He believes they should move forward and do that. That's responsible, the responsible step for our country.
And then one more on a very different subject. Does the president have a deadline in his mind in terms of like when his patience would run out on the Iran negotiations?
Look, I think the president's view is that it is in our interest to continue to pursue a diplomatic path forward. Because even though we certainly don't approve, in fact, we have great concern about a number of Iran's problematic activities in the global community, having visibility into their nuclear capabilities and capacities is in our national interests. The timeline is not endless, and I know the Secretary of State has conveyed that clearly. But right now we are open to returning to a 7th round of negotiations. The inauguration is today, so we will see what happens from here. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jen, the president today offers safe haven to Hong Kong residents who are living in the United States for 18 months. I'm wondering why 18 months? Is that something he'd be willing to extend? And is citizenship on the table for those people as well?
Well, the decision, the announcement that we made today, I know you're closely following this, but for others who have not followed this closely, is in reaction to the steps that have been taken by the PRC to crack down on human rights and frankly make it a place where Hong Kong's autonomy and the freedoms of people in Hong Kong are undermined. In terms of what could happen 18 months from now, I'm certainly not going to get ahead of that. Obviously, our hope and our objective and our work on the international forum is to change the behavior that is happening and the oppression that we're seeing of the people in Hong Kong. But certainly this step is one that is meant to ensure we are practicing what we preach in terms of human rights values and ensuring that people who are in this country don't face the ongoing repression that we're seeing in Hong Kong.
And one more related to China. China says it has supplied over 770 million vaccine doses to other countries. President Biden often says that the amount of vaccines that the U.S. has shared is more than the rest of the world combined. President Xi today also said they're planning to donate $2 billion this year. Just wondering if you question China's math and/or whether the U.S. is planning to give more than the president has already said.
We certainly, this is just the beginning, and we certainly plan to give more. We want to be the arsenal for vaccines in the global community. I would note, and then I'll come back to the numbers, that we provide vaccines to the world without strings attached. We want to provide them from a humanitarian standpoint because we think it is morally right, because we want to be a leader in the world on issues ranging from human rights to ensuring we're addressing the global pandemic. I'm not sure that's exactly the same approach that China is taking. In fact, it is not. But I would say that in terms of their numbers, it is not just us citing this. I believe the numbers we've cited, or the numbers he cited the other day, were from international experts who've looked at donations. I don't have data to confirm in terms of the numbers that China has contributed to the global community. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. The automakers that are appearing with the president today at this big announcement also lobbied the Trump administration to roll back emissions standards that were set by the Obama administration. So what gives this White House confidence that they are actually going to reach for this ambitious new goal, especially given the fact that the executive order is not binding?
Well, first I would say they're standing with the president today while he's making this announcement. That is certainly significant. And we've also seen a lot of these industries move in the direction of electric vehicles. That's not just the president saying that. That is the direction where a lot of these industries are moving. One of the things the president's going to talk about this afternoon is the fact that we need to address also supplies like batteries, which right now China is producing about 80% of batteries that are required for that industry to succeed. But I also would note that in addition to the announcement today, and I noted this a little bit at the top, there will be rulemaking steps that are announced by the appropriate agencies later this afternoon to ensure that we can move forward and make these pronouncements a reality.
And the founder of Tesla, Elon Musk, expressed surprise that he was not invited to this ceremony because his company is obviously such a large manufacturer of electric vehicles. Can you give us any insight into why Tesla wasn't included in this event?
Well, we of course welcome the efforts of all automakers who recognize the potential of an electric vehicle future and support efforts that will help reach the president's goal. And certainly Tesla is one of those companies. Today, it's the three largest employers of the United Auto Workers and the UAW president who will stand with President Biden as he announces his ambitious new target. But I would not expect this is the last time we talk about clean cars, the move toward electric vehicles, and we look forward to having a range of partners in that effort.
So it's not because Tesla is a non-union shop?
Well, these are the three largest employers of the United Auto Workers, so I'll let you draw your own conclusion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Democratic Congresswoman Cori Bush is saying that she favors spending tens of thousands on private security to keep her safe, and that people should, quote, suck it up, defunding the police has to happen. Didn't President Biden say a few weeks ago that anybody who accuses the party of being anti-police is lying?
Well, I think we shouldn't lose the forest through the trees here, which is that a member of Congress, an elected official, is concerned that her life is threatened, and that's disturbing, that any elected official would have to suffer death threats and fear for their life. So I'm not going to comment, of course, on their security arrangements. I don't have any more details on that, but I think we should start with that point first. I will say that the president has been crystal clear that he opposes defunding the police. He has said that throughout his campaign for office. His record over the last several decades has made that clear. He has proposed increased funding for law enforcement and the COPS program, increased funding from his predecessor, who was, as you might note or be aware of, a Republican. So I'd note that his record is pretty clear on this. There may be some in the Democratic Party, including Congresswoman Bush, who disagree with him. that's okay. But I would say the majority of Democrats, we've seen this in polling, and the majority of members also agree that we should not defund the police.
Is there a greater concern, though? I understand that's not the president's position, but is there a concern that defunding the police or suck it up, defunding the police has to happen might become a big Democratic message ahead of the midterms?
It does not appear to becoming a Democratic message, even though there might be a desire for that on the other side of the aisle.
Okay, and then there are reports the administration wants to require all foreign visitors to be vaccinated. Would that include migrants arriving in Texas and Arizona and being released into border towns?
Well, I knew there were a range of reports about this, so let me just give you a little bit of an update on this. One moment. And I know you asked kind of two questions there, and I promise I'll address them both. Let me reiterate, and I know Francesca asked a question about this the other day, the importance of international travel. Given where we are today with the Delta variant, we will plan to maintain existing travel restrictions at this point. However, what our interagency working groups are focused on, and this is, I think, what was reported, is working to develop a plan for a consistent and safe international travel policy. And that will be done through the prism of providing consistent guidance, equitable guidance, digestible guidance. And there's a lot of confusion about what the restrictions are now, and you all have asked a lot of good questions about it because it feels inconsistent, and it is. But that's what our focus is. So that is certainly under strong consideration, but it is under a policy process review right now that I won't get ahead of myself. As it relates to, I know there was also reporting about the vaccination of migrants. That's not what the CBP is doing. There are NGOs and other international organizations who are vaccinating migrants as they come across the border and as they work in partnership with us. Certainly that helps keep a range of people safe in the country.
But do you think that it's keeping people safe in McAllen, Texas, where 7,000 confirmed COVID-positive migrants have been released into the city since February, 1,500 in the last 7 days?
Well, I think it's important to note what's actually happening in McAllen. So there's actually been, they signed a disaster declaration and approved setting up a temporary emergency shelter to provide a space, to create an isolated space to mitigate this issue. And what happens is DHS, and this is the process of what happens, the agency, we're continuing to enforce Title 42, resulting first in the expulsion of the vast majority of those encountered at the border. We also, CBP also provides migrants who can't be expelled under Title 42 with PPE. They're required to wear the PPE. If any exhibit signs of illness in CBP custody, they're referred to local health systems for appropriate testing, diagnosis, isolation, and treatment. And obviously there are steps taken as needed, as this is certainly evidence of. I think we got to keep chugging here just because I don't want to run out of time. Kelly, go ahead.
With the eviction moratorium, landlords groups are already bringing legal action, and the courts are requiring some steps of respondents by tomorrow and so forth. Given that, is the president still confident that the CDC's action is within the law?
Yes, and he would not have moved forward if not. We can't control, of course, what the courts do. We certainly understand that. Separate branches of government, but also they'll make their own decisions. But what we can control and what we are very focused on is what we can do in states and what we can do to push this funding and money out. And, you know, as we've been talking about quite a bit in here, there was an incredible amount of activism, of calls for an extension of the eviction moratorium by a range of members of Congress. We talked about Congresswoman Bush in a different capacity. She's certainly one of them, and many others joined her in this effort. And what we are hopeful now is that we can all take that activism, those calls for an extension, those calls for providing relief to renters, and take them to states and pressure states and leaders to get this money out easier. I'd also note, was interesting I saw this morning, is that Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer, both in a moment of bipartisan agreement, agreed states need to do a better job. So that's what we can control. That's where our focus is. We can't control the courts. And obviously, we're not going to speak to ongoing litigation.
As you support private sector businesses around the country and other kinds of institutions that are setting requirements for vaccines and so forth, what guidance are you offering for how small businesses police that? If you're in a restaurant situation where you have wait staff or proprietors who would be challenging their own customers, what guidance does the federal government have for how this should be measured?
You mean vaccine verification and how it's approached? One, we, do support efforts to incentivize workforces, of course, to protect their workforces and get more people vaccinated. We want to ensure that it's done in a transparent way, that it's done in an equitable way, that if there are verification requirements, it can be done digitally. There are a range of ways to provide the information. So there are basic guidelines along those lines that we have conveyed, and we will continue to convey as people have questions. And we understand different localities and communities will apply any verification measures in different ways. Go ahead, Steve.
Jen, just to follow up on the international travel question, I understand that there's an interagency process, but is it the goal of that process to end in a vaccine mandate for people who are flying to the U.S.?
Well, that's one of the considerations, but the process has not been concluded yet. And what I was trying to note at the beginning is that right now, I think, which is why a lot of you have very good questions about this, there isn't consistency, right? And there are good questions about why, when this country has larger rates of vaccination, et cetera. What we want to create or determine through this process is a way to provide clear, digestible guidance that also has our public health front and center. So that's a consideration, but it has not concluded yet.
I know that it's early, and the president earlier today expressed his sadness on the passing of Richard Trump. Are you aware of any plans or intention on the president's part to attend any kind of memorial service or funeral?
That's a good question, and I think, as you all saw and noted, Richard Trump was someone who the president considered a friend. He considered an ally in the fight for worker rights, for collective bargaining, and I think, as you all have seen who have covered the president or followed him long before he became president, this is probably a passion of his that he shared quite deeply. This is a passion of his he shared quite deeply with Richard Trump. I don't know that there have been any plans announced yet. Certainly the president will be interested in those once they become available. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask first about the talks that have been going on with Senator Cornyn on the Hill related to the infrastructure bill. He's offering an amendment that would allow using some of the rescue plan money for infrastructure. And so I'm wondering if you have kind of an update on, I know the White House started engaging in those talks last night, so if there's been an agreement or where things stand, and if you could speak more broadly to the concern that some in the White House and Democrats have expressed that if you move money out of the rescue plan, you won't have it to deal with Delta or some other COVID thing.
Sure. The talks are ongoing. We believe they're happening in good faith. We are engaged in them. Our view is that there can be, and we think we are headed toward an agreement on this front, but we certainly are cognizant of and focused on the reality of funds being needed in communities across the country, as we are still in the midst of fighting a pandemic, and we are hopeful that any agreement on this front will take that into account front and center.
After what we saw with the eviction moratorium and the concerns of the president, and you have expressed about Delta particularly hitting them, I'm wondering, we heard from the White House about expanded unemployment benefits. Those are set to expire in September. Has there been any sort of thought or revision about the White House asking Congress to extend those unemployment benefits beyond September?
Mm-hmm. There has not been a change at this point in time. Obviously, we're quite focused, and we designed the American Rescue Plan with the goal of being able to plan for contingencies, including rises in moments of the virus, economic needs, different communities recovering at different rates. That's one of the reasons why we push for state and local funding, why the child tax credit will benefit people through the course of next year, why there are also additional funding that people can have access to in their communities through small business loans as well. But there hasn't been any change to that at this point.
And one last quick one to follow on Phil's question about the debt ceiling. Senate Democrats have been talking about attaching it to the CR. Mitch McConnell earlier today indicated the Republicans didn't want to support this, but the result of this is if Democrats throw it onto the CR, there could be a government shutdown in a couple months. And so I'm wondering if that is a concern, if the White House has any sort of preference for how they want Congress. Obviously, I know you want Congress to raise the debt ceiling, but any preference on how they do it? And are you at all concerned or preparing for the possibility of a government shutdown if that's the path that the Democrats pursue?
Well, certainly that's not our preference. I think it's safe to say. We are, of course, in close touch with leaders in Congress about the path forward, but our preference is for Congress to move forward, as they have 3 times during the last administration, to raise the debt ceiling, which is the responsible step to take. Go ahead, Francesca.
Thanks, Jen. I have another question, but because international travel has come up multiple times today.
Sure.
During the health briefing, it was talked about how vaccination requirements for foreign travelers are under consideration, but there were also other alternative pathways that were mentioned. Could you tell us a little bit more about those alternative pathways that are under discussion? And relatedly, does the U.S. have concerns that if it doesn't take action on this issue in the next few weeks, that other countries could ban American travelers from going there if the U.S. doesn't reciprocate?
Yeah, I mean, both really good questions, Francesca. I think what's important here to note is that while there hasn't been a final decision made, how the interagency working groups are looking at this is with the objective of taking steps that will return international travel at a moment when it's appropriate. And right now, we're not at that point because of the rise of the Delta variant. But we want to have a process in place that's prepared for when we hit that moment. And whatever the decision is made about what that will look like, we want it to be clear. We don't want it to be conflicting or confusing, and we want it to be equitable. So yes, there are a range of options. I'm not going to outline those from here, and certainly the one that has been reported on is strongly under consideration.
Okay, and on the topic of immigration, is the White House looking at action to help so-called documented dreamers? These are largely kids whose parents are here on H-1 visas.
Yeah.
They've waited for so long for green cards that the children are about to age out of the system and might have to return to their home country. So is the White House looking at any action on that issue?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Lala asked something similar the other day. And yes, this is a part of what the president has proposed addressing in a comprehensive immigration bill. It is certainly something he'd want to address and supports taking action on.
But not something necessarily that would show up in the reconciliation or upcoming budget bill.
It's not in the current, I think it's not in the current discussions, but it is something the president would like to address. Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, Jen. For those,
I'll go to you next. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, for those foreign visitors who are anticipating vaccination proof to come into the United States, if they've had the Chinese or Russian vaccines, should they be confident that those would be accepted, or should they go get another vaccine if it's available?
It's a really great question. We're just not at the point where the process has concluded. When it concludes, we will provide more details to everyone about what they would need to expect and what they would require and what they would need. I will also note that you've asked me repeatedly a very good question about American citizens who are overseas. You may have received an answer from the State Department, but just in case, to confirm for you, we don't provide direct medical care to private U.S. citizens abroad from the Department of State, as I think most of you who have covered the State Department are well aware. But we do work with countries that have a robust vaccination program to ensure that all residents, including U.S. citizens, can receive vaccinations. And we also work to ensure that U.S. citizens overseas who travel back to the United States can be can vaccinated easily and effectively. And of course, we provide all consular assistance to U.S. citizens in need overseas, and this includes providing U.S. citizens with clear information regarding eligibility to receive a vaccination in a foreign country, if it's confusing or they're not sure where to go or what their eligibility is, providing repatriation loans to assist destitute U.S. citizens with travel back to the United States, and helping them review country-specific data. Why don't you go ahead?
Secretary Cardona talked a lot about vaccinating students. What about vaccinations for teachers? Has the administration thought about this, especially for teachers who teach students who are too young to be vaccinated?
Well, we know that 90%, it's probably higher now, of teachers, I should say, across the country are vaccinated. So it certainly has moved in the right direction. And that's something school districts may make decisions about as it relates to mitigation measures. But that wouldn't be something I would expect from the federal government. It would be something that school districts would determine. But again, 90% of teachers as of a week or so ago were vaccinated, which we think is in part because they were prioritized from the beginning and because it has been emphasized by the administration in part. Go ahead, Katie.
Thanks. Governor Abbott of Texas is convening another special session in effort to pass that much debated election legislation there. He has also said that the White House has passed objections to this legislation amounts to disinformation. So what is the administration's response to that?
Look, our fundamental view is that if you are pushing for legislation that makes it harder and not easier to vote, that makes it less accessible, that limits the ability of people to get to the polls, to take time off to do that, then our question is, what are you afraid of here? Are you afraid of more people getting out to vote, or what's the concern? So again, our view is that we need federal legislation, of course, passed to protect people's voting rights across the country. There's ongoing discussions about that. The president would love to sign federal legislation into law.
And does the president think Texas Democrats should stay in town this time?
Well, certainly the president believes that, one, they've been outspoken advocates and champions of voting rights, and I can't say I'm exactly following too closely the legislative calendar there, but certainly if it required them to be there, we would support that. Go ahead.
Two questions. First, on COVID and vaccines, working to reach out to Republicans. Senator Lindsey Graham obviously tested positive for COVID and spoke out about the importance of the vaccine. Does the president have any plans to try to elevate the voices of Republicans like Senator Graham? Or there was a representative from South Carolina today who announced he tested positive. Also, a Republican said he was vaccinated. You know, there obviously a large swath of the country that is not vaccinated. That's been a problem in conservative areas. Does the president or the administration have any more efforts to try to elevate those voices?
Well, first I would say the majority of Republican governors also are doing exactly the right thing in their states. I mean, we talked about Asa Hutchinson earlier. There are a number of governors across the country who are either working with the federal government on resources we can provide, encouraging vaccination, encouraging masking. This is not political to us, nor should it be political. And certainly, Senator Graham has a constituency, and we think it's great that he's out there talking about the impact of the vaccine, even while we wish him a speedy recovery. I will note that what we've seen in poll after poll is that the most trusted voices are people in communities, not necessarily elected officials. So it's a net positive for elected officials to be out there talking about the efficacy of the vaccine, the fact that they're vaccinated, how it's, I know Senator Graham talked about how it protected him from more severe symptoms from COVID, but we're still gonna focus our emphasis and our efforts on local voices and local trusted leaders in communities, because that's what we've seen is most effective.
Today, Dr. Fauci talked about Operation Warp Speed, giving credit specifically to Alex Azar and his work. Any more effort to try to get the former president to speak out on this issue? People have said, Trump officials said that he deserves some more credit, and if Biden did give him that, that could potentially help get more people vaccinated.
Well, I would just first say that the president not only talked about the role of the last administration in getting the vaccine approved during the transition, but he talked about it just last week. So I wouldn't say we're shying away from talking about the fact that it was a vaccine that was approved during some of the vaccines, I should say, approved during a Republican administration, and the implementation and effort to get it in the arms of people during a Democratic administration. The former president has said he got the vaccine. He said people should get it. And if he wants to do that more, then good for him. That's good. Okay, go ahead.
On the requirement that federal employees be vaccinated or get tested, is there an estimate of the cost of this testing to the federal agencies? And will the administration commit to, once the testing starts, making public how much that is costing?
Well, it's agency by agency, and obviously we're less than a full work week in here, so different agencies are going to be accounting for it different ways, but I certainly think it's going to be covered by existing funds and existing budgets of each agency, but it's not one federal pot.
But can we get an accounting of how much that is costing?
I can certainly check and see, but it's existing funding. So, as people put out their budgets or spending, I'm sure it would be accounted for in terms of how we're planning for and protecting people from COVID. And obviously, funding to cover your testing is included in some of this as well. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Tam.
Oh, sorry, I can't see. On the international travel working groups, do you have any sort of a time frame on when their work would be completed, regardless of whether,
Like when the policy would be concluded?
Yeah, when the policy would be concluded. I know you can't tell us when Delta's going to go away.
Well, our goal is to have the policy ready when we're safe to reopen to travel. So it's hard to determine what that looks like. We'll have a better estimate as we see what's happening in our country and around the world. There are active, ongoing interagency discussions, but I don't have an estimate on when it will be formally concluded.
And On the Delta variant and breakthrough infections, there have been more and more sort of anecdotal cases of breakthrough infections, famous people like Lindsey Graham getting breakthrough infections. Has the administration thought about or reconsidered the way it talks about the incidence of breakthrough infections, how rare they are, what they look like? Is there any consideration of acknowledging in a more fulsome way that yes, these are kind of happening on a semi-regular basis?
We have said that. They are happening. I think the most important thing, though, is that vaccines are doing exactly what they should be doing, which is protecting people, the vast majority of people, from severe illness, from hospitalization. And there's data that's come out in a number of the states that have been hardest hit even in the last couple of weeks. Almost 100% of the new hospitalizations in Alabama are with unvaccinated folks. In Florida, officials have said that more than 95% of those hospitalized were not vaccinated. In Ohio, 99% of Ohio COVID-19 deaths, hospitalizations in 2021 were unvaccinated. So our objective is to project to people very clearly how vaccines can save your life. It doesn't mean that every person who has a vaccine will not test positive for COVID. We know there are breakthrough cases around the country. As more people get vaccinated, there will be more, just as a percentage, just by numbers. We certainly acknowledge that, but I think it's also important for people to understand the benefit of vaccination, which is that it can save your life, it can prevent you from going to the hospital, and that's where we're trying to alleviate confusion.
Madam Paul, do you have time for one more?
Sure. Okay, why don't we go to you in the back? Oh, hello, Nadia, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Is the White House worried about the threat and counter-threat between Israel and Iran and the high rhetoric with the threat of the Israelis launching a military strike against Iran?
Well, of course, Israel as a sovereign country has the right to defend itself, and we certainly recognize that first and foremost. We, of course, are working with the international community and have concerns about the escalating activity we've seen as it relates to the seized tanker, the Asphalt Princess, also the Mercer Street attack. And these are all certainly issues that are of concern to us and of concern to the international community. We feel it follows a pattern of attacks and other belligerent behavior, and these actions also threaten freedom of navigation through crucial waterways, something that is posing a risk to a range of countries around the world. I would also note that we know our British partners have called for action, called for steps in a coordinated way from international bodies, including the United Nations, which we would certainly support. Thanks so much, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, Jen. Do you support the booster shots? Jen, do you support the booster shots?
We support them if the FDA approves them, and we'll have enough supply. That's the good news.
Thank you, Jen.
I just spent 4 years in it.
She's moved on. I don't even know who these other people are. She's coming. A law professor at the University of North Carolina.
That guy,
Yeah.
whoever that is.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Happy Thursday. This is your 2-minute warning. Today, you'll hear from Attorney General Merrick Garland as well as Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark. We'll be out in about 2 minutes, so let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.
No folders. So much for a bad little 2 minutes.
If I was mayor, that would be my first bill. She was at the time, she was at the law. I just want to see if I can get approved. And, yeah, I don't know what we're at. But yeah, well, if she's there.
Good afternoon. I'm joined here today by Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Kristen Clark. Today we are announcing that the Justice Department is opening an investigation into the City of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department. The investigation will determine whether the Phoenix Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of violations of the Constitution or federal law. This is the third pattern or practice investigation I have announced as Attorney General. Each time, I have noted that these investigations aim to promote transparency and accountability. This increases public trust, which in turn increases public safety. We know that law enforcement shares these goals. The Justice Department has briefed Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego and Police Chief Jerry Williams about the investigation. We are pleased by their pledge of support. They too recognize that we share common aims. Our investigation in Phoenix will be led by the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. It is based on the division's extensive review of publicly available information, and it will consider several issues. First, whether the Phoenix Police Department uses excessive force in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Second, whether the Phoenix Police Department engages in discriminatory policing practices that violate the Constitution and federal law. Third, whether the department violates the First Amendment by retaliating against individuals who are engaged in protected expressive activities. Fourth, whether the city and its police department respond to people with disabilities in a manner that violates the Americans with Disabilities Act. This includes whether decisions to criminally detain individuals with behavioral health disabilities are proper. And fifth, whether the Phoenix Police Department violates the rights of individuals experiencing homelessness by seizing and disposing of their belongings in a manner that violates the Constitution. Those last two areas of investigative focus speak to an important issue that is broader than the Phoenix investigation. Our society is straining the policing profession by turning to law enforcement to address a wide array of social problems. Too often, we ask law enforcement officers to be the first and last option for addressing issues that should not be handled by our criminal justice system. This makes police officers' jobs more difficult, increases unnecessary confrontations with law enforcement, and hinders public safety. This past week, there has been much attention to the impending risk of mass evictions, which would put millions of tenants at risk of losing shelter. Needless to say, the impact on individuals and families would be devastating, and as the CDC has made clear, the impact on public health would likewise be devastating, fueling the spread of COVID-19 infections in the affected communities. Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta is leading a Justice Department effort with state court leaders on this problem. On June 24th, she sent a letter to state courts urging them to implement eviction diversion strategies that will increase the chances that families can stay in their homes. Mass evictions would also have serious implications for law enforcement, adding to a crisis of homelessness that strains but cannot be solved by the criminal justice system. The ramifications do not end there. Far too often, police officers are the first ones called when someone is experiencing a mental health crisis in any setting. But it is almost certain that police will be called to respond to someone experiencing a mental health crisis if that person is also without housing. And as we have repeatedly seen, the risks to everyone involved in such interactions are enormous. These issues must be addressed if we are to ease the burdens that our society places on law enforcement and ensure the safety of our communities. The Justice Department, through grant-making, technical assistance, and training, supports law enforcement and community-based programs to tackle these challenges. I will now turn the podium over to Assistant Attorney General Clark, who will talk more about our pattern or practice investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Protecting the rule of law demands that those who enforce our laws also abide by them. Ensuring that law enforcement acts in a lawful and accountable manner is a priority for the Civil Rights Division. As the Attorney General has just announced, following an extensive review of publicly available information regarding the Phoenix Police Department, today we are opening a civil pattern or practice investigation into the City of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department. We have reviewed court files, media reports, citizen complaints, and we also considered factors that we ordinarily weigh in determining whether to open an investigation. including the nature and seriousness of the allegations, the number of allegations, the steps that a department may be taking to address the allegations, and the history of the department. We found that the evidence here warrants a full investigation, but we approach this process with no predispositions or pre-drawn conclusions. Our pattern or practice investigations have been successful at identifying not only whether systemic misconduct is occurring, but also its root causes, so that those root causes can ultimately be fixed. As part of our investigation in Phoenix, we will meet with officers and command staff, as well as members of the broader Phoenix community. We will review incident reports, body-worn camera footage, and other data and documentation collected by the department. We will also review the department's policies, training materials, and supervision records, as well as documents related to systems of accountability, including how complaints are investigated and how discipline is imposed. As you know, about 3 months ago, we launched similar investigations into the city of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Police Department, as well as the city of Louisville and the Louisville Police Department. In both cities, as in Phoenix, we've been fortunate to have the support of city officials and police chiefs. In that short time, Justice Department lawyers have had in-person and virtual meetings with close to 1,000 community stakeholders in Minneapolis and Louisville. Hundreds more have submitted messages to the Justice Department. Department lawyers have participated in over 50 ride-alongs with officers. We have had 4 meetings with full command staff and spoken to officers across both individual interviews and roll call briefings. We will take the same approach in Phoenix. Our career attorneys have decades of experience working on investigations like the one we open here today. One thing we have learned over the decades is that we must and will work collaboratively with the Phoenix community and with the Phoenix Police Department. If we conclude that there are no systemic violations of constitutional or federal statutory rights by the city or Phoenix Police Department, we will make that known. If, on the other hand, we conclude that there is reasonable cause to believe that such violations are occurring, we will issue a report describing our findings and then aim to work cooperatively with the city to reach agreement on the best remedies. If an appropriate remedy cannot be achieved through agreement, the Attorney General is authorized to bring litigation to secure an appropriate injunctive remedy. This morning, our team had the opportunity to speak with city officials about our investigation. We are pleased that Mayor Gallego and Chief Williams have pledged their full support. I will repeat the same message our team conveyed to city officials and city leaders this morning. We're committed to following the facts where they lead and doing so in a timely manner so that we can expeditiously address any pattern or practice of unlawful conduct that may be identified. We look forward to working together with the city and the Phoenix Police Department toward the shared goals of ensuring constitutional policing and fostering greater cooperation between law enforcement officers and the community members that they serve.
Okay, we'll take a couple questions. Jeff?
Garland, was there a final straw in Phoenix?
I'm going to leave that question because it's specifically about the Phoenix investigation to the Assistant Attorney General.
Our investigation looked into a number of issues. What we're planning to roll up our sleeves and look at closely is whether or not the Phoenix Police Department uses force unconstitutionally, including deadly force, whether the department engages in discriminatory policing, whether the department engages in retaliatory conduct by making arrest or using force against individuals engaged in peaceful, expressive activities. We're going to look at whether the city and the police department discriminate against people with disabilities in violation of the ADA. We're going to look at the department and whether they violate the rights of people experiencing homelessness by unlawfully seizing or disposing of personal property during cleanings or sweeps of encampments. And we're also going to look at the department's policies and training, as well as how they investigate and hold officers accountable for misconduct, as failures of these systems may contribute to violations of federal law.
This is also for Ms. Clark. Sorry. The investigation, the nature of the investigation with respect to people experiencing homelessness seems new. I wonder if you could speak as to some of the legal issues they're looking at there, Fourth Amendment and the like, and also whether this is intended to send a message to other law enforcement entities which routinely sweep across the country and cities across the country the belongings of the homeless.
The basis for our investigation includes the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, whether those sweeps, unlawfully seizing and disposing the belongings of persons experiencing homelessness, may indeed trigger a violation of the 4th and 14th Amendments. And so that is another basis for the investigation that we are launching today.
Mr. Attorney General, you mentioned the eviction crisis and the dangers posed by mass evictions. Can you tell us, in light of what's gone on in the last day or two, were you or the Justice Department consulted about the administration's reversal in policy on the eviction ban, and are you confident that you'll be able to get it through the Supreme Court?
So, as I said, the effects of mass evictions would be devastating, both on individuals and, as the CDC has said, on communities because of the risk of spread of COVID. The department has vigorously defended the statutory authority of the CDC to issue eviction moratorium, and we will continue to do so. As I'm sure you know, there was a filing last night by plaintiffs in that case. We will be making our own filings, and as is appropriate, we will respond in our filings to those kinds of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Here of Regeneron, and so people can get it, and we want them to get it. So I'm going to let John Corris come up, say a few things, and then we'll hear from the physicians.
Thank you very much. Well, a couple things. What I'd like to do with you today is just give you a little bit of
at the State Department. Commissioner and I have been working very closely together over the last 6 months since we've come to office, and in particular, we're very much looking forward, President Biden is very much looking forward to meeting with President Zelensky at the end of the month. So we're going to spend some time, I think, preparing for that meeting. And of course, we have a lot of ongoing work to do. The United States is very much committed to Ukraine's independence and sovereignty and territorial integrity. We'll talk about challenges to each of those and the work that we're doing together to stand for a strong Ukraine that can defend itself against external aggression, but also pursue the vitally important process of reform to strengthen even more its democracy and its economy. And we'll compare notes on a number of other regional challenges where we're both together very much focused. So Dimitri, it's great to have you here. I look forward to getting some work done. Welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure and honor to be here today and to see my colleague and friend Tony Blinken, who has been very open and very friendly since the very first days of his appointment as Secretary of State. The United States acted firmly when Russia resorted to escalation along our border and in the occupied territories of Ukraine just a couple of months ago. And since then, we have a very dynamic dialogue with the Biden administration. I came here, as Tony rightly pointed out, to prepare the visit of my president to Washington. We want this visit to be productive, to have many deliverables, which will bring our relations to the next level. We believe it's in the interest not only of the United States of America and Ukraine, but also in the interest of the region that I represent, where democracy has to be advanced, where prosperity has to be promoted, and where, first and foremost, security has to be ensured. Ukraine is a stronghold of democracy in Central Eastern Europe, and we want to work closely with the United States to make the entire region a success story. Thank you.
Nobody wants to see that. I just want to discuss it.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Channel 2, head on camera. Channel 2, head on camera. Channel 2 cuts. Channel 2 cuts. Tone on Channel 1.
It didn't piss any mustard. Somebody just probably told him. Not for this event, but maybe for Grayson. When McCarthy was down in Florida with DeSantis. Yes, it's their route. Yeah. Hopefully somebody comes over here first. Yes.
Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's all I got. I'm not. We'll get into that later. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Everybody's audio is good out there? Great.
probably better to leave a truck on the property. Yeah, a lot of events are still full on, like the briefing room is still full. Yeah, that's right. They put a truck on the truck. But it's good because you don't
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and silence your cell phones. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and silence your cell phones. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by Mr. Bernie Rickey, President of the United Workers, Local 600.
Good afternoon. My name is Bernie Rickey, and I'm president of UAW Local 600 in Dearborn, Michigan, home of the historic Rouge Complex and the Ford Lightning. Mr. President, it is my honor to be here with you today. We know that the UAW and Joe Biden have worked together from your earliest days in Delaware, where we supported you in your first run for office. We were there at the beginning, and we are so proud to be here now with our brother in the White House here today. UAW members are excited about the future. The UAW is ready to build these electric cars, trucks, and the batteries that go in them. We know that President Biden has our back. We know he understands that we can grow our industry and preserve and create more good-paying union jobs through his Build Back Better plan. We know that this president understands that as we move towards this bright future, none of us will be left behind, that we are the true engine in making this technology work, grow, and power America's middle class. That is why I'm proud to introduce President Biden today as a UAW member and a proud American. Mr. President, you have our back and we have yours. Thank you, President Biden.
Please, everybody sit down. Please, please, please. Good afternoon. Before I begin, let me start with something, I apologize, more somber. I learned a couple hours ago when my staff came in that a close friend of mine, and I think of many of you as well, Rich Trumka, died today from a heart attack. The reason I was a few minutes late coming out, and I apologize for that, I was talking to his wife and to his son who called. He wasn't just a great labor leader. He was a friend. He's a friend of yours too, Debbie, I think. And he's someone I could confide in, and you knew whatever he said he'd do, he would do. It was simple, Tommy. You knew him well as well. He was always there. He was an American worker, always fighting for working people, protecting their wages, their safety, their pensions, and their ability to build a middle-class life. I've also believed that the middle class built America, but I know who built the middle class: unions. Unions built the middle class. There's no doubt that Rich Trumka helped build unions all across this country. My heart goes out to Barbara and Rich Jr. and the grandkids. And I might point out that, I used to always kid him. He was from soft coal country. I was from hard coal country. We used to have this thing about, he used to be president of the United Mine Workers, and that's how he got started. Folks, let me now turn to today's event. I want to thank Bernie for the introduction and for being part of the best auto workers in the world. Thank you, Ray Curry, president of UAW. If you're here, Ray, I was in with you. It's good to see you, pal. And I also want to thank the leaders of the big three companies for being here today. Mary Barra, General Motors. I want to tell you, I think she's one of the reasons we're here today. We had a long discussion on a Zoom call with a bunch of labor leaders and other major business leaders, and she made a commitment, and she's keeping it. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Jim Farley of Ford. And by the way, My dad was in the automobile business. He sold Fords for a while, but mostly General Motors products. But you see that sucker over there? 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds. It's all electric. I tell you what, and I want to say publicly, I have a commitment from Mary when they make the first electric Corvette, I get to drive it. Right, Mary? You think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding. And my entire Secret Service detail went, oh my God, let's go. And Mark Stewart of Stellantis, Mark, we used to have one of your big plants in my state, and as the man I'm about to recognize, a special thanks to all the members of Congress who are here, but I want to pay particular recognition to my chairman, my buddy, we served together for years, Tommy Carper. Tom, and I know that I kid my Michigan friends, but I just want you to know, say to Senators Heinrich and Markey and Whitehouse and Padilla and Duckworth, and I'm leaving some folks out, I'm sure, Representative Kathy Castor, and the Michigan delegation that's here today, Debbie Stabenow, Senator Gary Peters, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who is automobiles, and Dan Kildee. But I want you all to know, I remind the Michigan delegation of this. It used to be when I first got elected, Deb, and I used to tell your husband this as well, we had a higher percentage of auto workers in Delaware than any state in the union, including Michigan. Now, the fact we had a very small population, and we had almost 100,000 auto workers in our states, counting the Autolite and others, had something to do with it. But I just want to be very straightforward. UAW brung me to the dance, as they say. And I also know we're missing someone truly special and a dear friend of all of us, Senator Carl Levin, who passed away last week. Carl and I served together for 30 years in the United States Senate together. He was one of the most, I think all my colleagues in Newham will attest to this, one of the most honorable people, most decent people I've not only served with, but I've ever known. He was a tireless champion of the American worker and the iconic American automobile industry. And so he embodied everything that his beloved Michigan and our country represents. Respect, dignity, pride in the nation and pride in what we built. And so today, labor and industry, state and local leaders, we're all working together to write the next chapter of the American story. As I've said before, we're in competition with China and many other nations for the 21st century. To win, we're going to have to make sure the future will be made in America. Back in May, I toured the Ford plant, as I mentioned, a state-of-the-art facility in Dearborn, where the UAW workers like Bernie are building the first ever all-electric Ford 150. And as I said, the best part is I got to drive it. It's incredible, and just like the other vehicles that are behind me today. They're a vision of the future that is now beginning to happen, a future of the automobile industry that is electric, battery electric, plug-in hybrid electric, fuel cell electric. It's electric, and there's no turning back. The question is whether we'll lead or fall behind in the race for the future. It's whether we'll build these vehicles and the batteries that got them to where they are in the United States, here in the United States, or we're going to have to rely on other countries for those batteries. Whether or not the job to build these vehicles and batteries are good-paying union jobs, jobs with benefits, jobs that are going to sustain the continued growth of the middle class. They have to be. They have to be made here in America. Right now, China is leading the race. It is one of the largest and fastest growing electric vehicle markets in the world. And a key part of the electric vehicle, to state the obvious, is the battery. And right now, 80% of the manufacturing capacity for these batteries is done in China. And here's the deal. It's not China's battery technology that's much more innovative than anyone else's. Remember, our national labs in America, our universities, our automakers led in the development of this technology. We led in the development of this technology. And there's no reason why we can't reclaim that leadership and lead again. But we just have to move, we have to move fast. You know, when Barack and I were in office, President Obama and I were in office, that's what we were doing. In 2009, the automobile industry was flat on its back. We were told that we'd never be able to sell American-made cars at the same rate as we did before. But we didn't listen to the naysayers. We even had some in both parties who didn't think we should, quote, bail out the industry, if you remember. Well, we bet on the American worker, and we extended a lifeline, and they stepped up, made sacrifices to do it, and we've saved more than 1 million jobs in the process. Working with the auto industry, we set fuel efficiency standards and provided incentives for folks to buy fuel-efficient vehicles. Through the Recovery Act, we made the largest investment in clean energy and battery technology ever made. And then the previous administration came along into office, and they rolled back the standards we set. Despite bipartisan support for consumer incentives, they also let the federal tax credit expire, penalizing auto workers who were at the time selling most electric vehicles in the world, in the United States. They announced Infrastructure Week. They did it for every week for 4 years, and not once got anything done. Not once. Folks, the rest of the world is moving ahead. We've just got to step up. Government, labor, and industry working together, which you're seeing here today. We have a playbook, and it's going to work. Today, I'm announcing steps we're taking to set a new pace for electric vehicles. First, I'm following through on the campaign commitment to reverse the previous administration's short-sighted rollback of vehicle emissions and efficiency standards. I'm doing so with the support of the auto industry, the automobile industry. Today, the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Transportation are unveiling proposals to do just that. These agencies are beginning to work on the next round of standards for a broad class of vehicles, for cars, SUVs, pickup trucks, medium and heavy-duty vehicles. Importantly, we have announcements today from automakers representing nearly the entire auto industry market who have positioned around the ambition of 40 to 50% of all vehicles sold by 2030 in America being electric. This is a big deal. But to unlock the full potential, we have to keep investing in our workers and our manufacturing capacity. And that's what our Build Back Better plan is all about. It's about leveraging once-in-a-generation investments in a whole-of-government effort to lift up American auto workers and strengthen the American leadership in the world in a clean car technology, trucks, and not just cars, but trucks as well, and buses. You know, that's why today I'm signing an executive order setting out a target of 50% of all passenger vehicles sold by 2030 will be electric, and set in motion an all-out effort. That's why, along with the members of Congress here today, we're working around the clock on the Build Back Better plan, which does 3 critical things. 1, it transforms our infrastructure. We're going to put Americans to work modernizing our roads, our highways, our ports, our airports, rail, and transit systems. You know, that included putting IBEW members and other union workers to work, installing a national network of 500,000 charging stations along our roads and highways and at our homes and our apartments. 2, we're going to boost our manufacturing capacity. The Build Back Better plan invests in new and retool facilities and employs workers with good paying wages, good jobs. It grants to kickstart new battery and parts production, loans and tax credits to boost manufacturing of these clean vehicles. And our Build Back Better plan makes the largest investment in research and development in generations. This will help innovate, manufacture, and build the supply chains for batteries, semiconductors, and those small computer chips and electric trucks and cars are going to be even more reliant upon as we move forward. Never again should we be in a situation we face today with a semiconductor shortage. And we know these kinds of federal investments, we know that they work. It was the Defense Department and NASA that got the modern semiconductor industry on its feet decades ago. Our own Department of Energy pioneered and transformed the battery industry where Barack and I, when we were in office. And with the help of the Recovery Act, grants and loans, battery prices dropped 85%. because we were forward-looking. We need that same mindset today. Thirdly, support of consumers and fleets. That means purchasing incentives for consumers to buy clean vehicles, union-made right here in America, like the ones championed by Debbie Stabenow and Ron Wyden in the Senate, which provides $7,500 basic credit, $2,500 credit for vehicles made in America, and an additional $2,500 credit for union-made vehicles. That means spurring demand by converting the federal government's enormous fleet of vehicles. We have over 600,000 vehicles, we have a lot of vehicles, 60,000 of them, I should say, into an all-American made clean vehicles. So that's what we're going to do as we roll out and get rid of the existing fleet. We're going to support the electric transit system as well and the electric school buses. Look, and there's one other thing we have in our playbook that will help us outcompete other nations: the American worker. The American worker. I really believe this, and I know you guys do too. The American worker is our ace in the deck. Now I know many of you watching at home are like the folks I grew up in Scranton and Claymont, Delaware. They feel left out, left behind in an economy and an industry that's rapidly changing. I get it. I understand it. But we're going to leave no one behind. Nearly 90% of the jobs created in our infrastructure plan do not require a bachelor's degree. And when we invest in our infrastructure, we're going to buy American products, American materials, and services from American businesses made in America by American workers. And we're going to do everything in our power to encourage and protect the right of workers to unionize and collectively bargain. The bottom line is, we are proposing a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America. That's what it's going to be. And we need automakers and other companies to keep investing in America. We need them not to take the benefits of our public investments and expand electric vehicles and battery manufacturing production abroad. We need you to deepen your partnership with the UAW, continue to pay good wages, support local communities across the country. That's why I'm so proud the UAW is standing here today as well. It's why I'm proud that the three largest employers are sitting here and their sights are set, not only on electric vehicles, but on expansion, expanding union jobs, expanding the middle class. It matters. You know, in the spring, I kept my commitment to convene leaders of all the major economies in the world it was not in person, but we did it on a Zoom call with a whole bunch of folks, including the heads of state of China, India, Japan, the European Union, for a meeting hosted in the White House on the most consequential issues facing the world. And the agreement is the climate crisis. And I made clear what I've long believed and I think of when I think of the climate crisis. Beyond the devastation of the lives and livelihoods and the health of our very planet, when I hear climate, I think jobs, good paying union jobs. I wanted the world to see there was a consensus that we're at an inflection point in world history. If we act to save the planet, we can also come out of it better. We can millions of good-paying jobs that generate significant economic growth and opportunity, raise the standard of living for people not only here but around the world. But I also wanted to put the world on notice. America is back. America is back. We're in the competition for the 21st century, the future that we built right here in America. Let me close with this. Our economy is recovering. In 6 months, we're seeing the fastest job growth on record at this point in any administration in history, the fastest economic growth in nearly 40 years. And we've shown each other in the world that there's no quit in America. None, none, none. And it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America. We are the United States of America. There's not a single solitary thing, nothing, beyond our capacity to get done when we do it together. We have to act, and that's what we're doing today. And again, I want to thank the CEOs of the automobile companies, and I also want to thank all the auto workers. Thank you all for being here today. Now I'm going to sign the executive order, but I'd like to invite my congressional colleagues to come up if they're willing to stand behind me here when we do this, and others who know they're supposed to come on up. Thank you all very much.
Certainly will. President?
Good to see you. Good to see you.
How are you? Mr. President? Good to see you.
I love that amendment. I hope I didn't get you in trouble by saying it. Tommy, good to see you, pal. How are you, man?
It's exciting.
Come on, let's let the CEOs go through too.
Yes.
Now, when I sign, it's so bright. When I sign this executive order, usually I'm able to give a pen to all the folks who are part of it. I've got one pen, but I'm going to make sure you each.
We're going to fight.
You each are going to get a pen. I promise you. This is an executive order strengthening America's leadership in clean cars and trucks. And again, let me start off by thanking the CEOs as well as the UAW. But you all you electeds are the reason why it's happening. Thank you. All right. Thank you. I was on the phone.
No. Well, just heard this morning.
Yeah, I just
The big
just
commitment,
happened.
50% of the U.S.
He's on a campus.
Thank you.
Really
Yes.
It is.
Demand is so much more.
But
he
but the pieces that you described
He's up
this
there smiling about all of this.
I think he, by the way, he turns a lot of us around and get in trouble. Hold it in.
That's how much the thing is for us CEOs is to allocate the money for this country.
I think you were on it as well. With labor and the largest employers. And Mary had a lawsuit against California for 500 standards. No. I didn't surprise it. We went through the whole thing, and Mary started, we got to blame her for that. Mary said, look, the next day she picked this phone and called California and said, we're dropping the suit. And made a commitment to me. We're going to go electric. Change. Everything began to change. So, as we say in my Irish Catholic household, Mary, quite the trip.
Our kids
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated.
That's Kiku's going to have to help us with that. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated.
That's a good idea, but I think that's a good idea.
President Biden,
so
are
you
you
don't think part just help the driver? Because lots of times people have a couple of drinks and don't realize.
There's thousands of cars in lots around the country lacking chips, Mr. President.
I know they are. That's why we're going to invest billions of dollars in bringing chip manufacturing to the United States. A bipartisan effort that we've gotten done. It's going to work because we can't afford. For example, we got the chair of the board of Ford here somewhere. They had to slow down production because of the lack of chips. It's a gigantic, gigantic issue.
How much do you
DeSantis, who is using your words about don't be in the way, and he's saying, I am in the way to block too much interference from the federal government. Your response, Mr. President?
Governor who?
DeSantis.
Why is there
How did California's 2019 framework influence executive order that you signed?
Well, I think the framework was really helpful. And the reason I say that is that, initially the industry was opposed to it. And we literally sat over the EOB, and I had 5 of the largest corporations in America, with Mary Barry representing General Motors on the screen. You've been there with me when I've done this. And 5 major labor unions. And when it was all over, Mary Barry called and said, I'm going to withdraw the suit against California. They were suing California to say you can't have a higher standard than the rest of the nation, which was what the last president did. He eliminated the standard. And she said, I'm going to drop the suit and I'm going to go electric. And we got the IBW involved. And the biggest thing that's happening here is there's a realization on the part of both labor and business now that this is the future. We can't sit by. Think about the battery technology. Most of that research and development occurred with the United States taxpayers' dollars from the Department of Energy, the DOD, here in the United States. But we didn't take advantage of it. We didn't move them. China moved. China now owns the market. So we just got to get back in the game.
How we manage to moratorium's not being held up.
How is the eviction moratorium constitutional, sir?
I think it is, but there's a call. There are a number of constitutional scholars. I spoke to a lot of constitutional scholars. Let me explain last time why I did what I did. My greatest concern is I have three concerns. One, we have $45 billion sitting in state treasuries right now that were designed specifically to help landlords be able to not have to go bankrupt so that and keep those renters who couldn't afford to pay their rent because of the pandemic, because of unemployment being as bad as it was since the Great Depression. We gave it to the states and the localities to be able to keep renters in their homes as well as being able to continue to keep their business going. The court ruled and made it very clear, the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. You don't have the authority to do that. And although it was a 5-4 decision. I got on the phone and contacted a number of constitutional scholars I've relied on for years, beyond my own team. And there was a split. And the consensus of the folks that I have used the most said, we think you have the authority to do it, but in this court, who knows? Last point I'll make. So, what I decided to do, I did not tell the CDC. I made a commitment to you all. I would not tell the CDC what they should do, and I would not tell the Justice Department who they should prosecute. And I kept that commitment. So I asked the CDC to go back and take another look at was there anything possible, and check with the legal scholars as well. Now wait a minute, they went back, and they concluded that if we had a completely different change, we did not try to continue the existing moratorium, it was a different moratorium with another rationale. The rationale was that because of the COVID spread of the virus so rapidly, and the Delta COVID, what happened was they said all those counties that in fact are in a situation where they are in that red zone, that we should hold for another month, I think I said 2 months, the ability to evict people from those facilities. And I said, okay, thank you. And I went ahead and did it, but here's the deal. I can't guarantee that the court won't rule that we don't have that authority. But at least we'll have the ability to, if we have to appeal, to keep this going for a month. At least, I hope longer than that. And in the process, by that time we'll get a lot of that 45.
Come on, guys, let's go back this way. Come on, back this way, please. Into underneath, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Hey, guys, come on, let's go. We're going back. We're going back. We're not going to stop.
checked with the legal scholars as well. Now wait a minute, they went back and they concluded that if we had a completely different change, we did not try to continue the existing moratorium, it was a different moratorium with another rationale. The rationale was that because of the COVID spread of virus so rapidly, that and the Delta COVID, what happened was they said all those counties that in fact are in a situation where they are in that red zone, that we should hold for another month, or I think I said 2 months, the ability to evict people from those facilities. And I said, okay, thank you. I went ahead and did it, but here's the deal. I can't guarantee you the court won't rule that we don't have that authority. But at least we'll have the ability to, if we have to appeal, to keep this going for a month. At least, I hope longer. And in the process, by that time we'll get a lot of that 45.
Come on, guys, let's go back this way. Come on, back this way, please. Into, underneath, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Hey, guys, come on, let's go. We're going back. We're going back. We're not going to do that.
Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hey, 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 hey. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hey, 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 hey. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, what's up?
You good?
Yeah, I told McNabb to go grab my water.
Basically, his fault.
Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Shannon. Shannon. No, I just want to make sure I put it in the right spot.
What's that? Oh, no, you're fine. I'm going to go talk to those guys. This mic needs to move over there.
Microphone check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good back there, Darren?